The smell of rain mixed with something sharp and electric filled the air above Green Hollow. Robert Hayes wiped sweat from his forehead and looked up at the darkening sky. The clouds moved wrong, spinning in circles that nature never intended. His weather monitor had died an hour ago, along with every other piece of technology on his farm. He walked faster through the wheat field, counting his cattle by eye since the automated system was down. 19 cows stood together near the eastern fence, their eyes wide with nervousness. Something had them spooked. Robert had learned to trust animal instincts during his 15 years of farming. When creatures that could not speak showed fear, smart men paid attention. Thunder rolled across the valley, but it carried a strange whistling sound underneath. Robert stopped walking and turned toward the noise. A streak of fire cut through the purple clouds, trailing smoke and debris. The object tumbled as it fell, clearly out of control. It disappeared behind the northern hill with a crash that shook the ground beneath his boots. Robert ran. His legs protested after a long day of work, but he pushed through the pain. The wheat stalks whipped against his arms as he crossed the field. Whatever had fallen was big, and it had landed on his property. The colonial authorities would want to know about it, but Robert wanted to see it first. This was his land, after all. He reached the top of the hill and froze. A crater 20 feet wide had been carved into his best wheat field. In the center lay something that looked like a nightmare brought to life. The creature was massive, easily 12 feet long, with scales that shimmered between deep blue and black. Wings, torn and bleeding, stretched out at odd angles. Smoke rose from burns across its body. Robert had seen pictures of the Drakari in the colonial news feeds. Dragon warriors, they were called. One of the proudest species in the known galaxy, famous for their combat skills and their cold attitude toward other races. This one was dying. The creature's chest moved with shallow breaths. Its eyes, golden and vertical slitted like a cat's, opened and fixed on Robert. Intelligence burned in that gaze, along with pain and something that might have been fear. The Drakari tried to rise, but its body refused to cooperate. A low growl rumbled from its throat. Robert raised his hands slowly, palms out. He knew the gesture meant nothing to an alien, but it was all he had. The creature watched him with those burning eyes, tracking every movement. Robert took a step forward. The growling grew louder. "Easy there," Robert said quietly, using the same tone that calmed frightened horses. "I'm not here to hurt you." The Drakari clearly did not understand his words, but something in Robert's voice made it stop growling. Its head dropped back to the ground, exhausted from the effort of staying alert. Blood, darker than human blood, pooled beneath its body. Robert made his decision in that moment. He could call the authorities. They would come with weapons and questions. They might help the creature, or they might see it as a threat to be contained. Either way, this injured warrior would be locked away, studied, and treated like a dangerous animal, or Robert could do what his grandmother had taught him years ago. "You help those who need helping," she had said. "Doesn't matter if they're human or not. Suffering is suffering." He turned and jogged back to his farmhouse. The barn would have to serve as a medical facility. It was not designed for a 12-foot dragon warrior, but it would provide shelter and privacy. Robert gathered supplies with practiced efficiency. Veterinary medical kits, clean water, blankets, and the heavy-duty cargo sled he used for moving equipment. The electromagnetic storm continued to rage overhead as Robert returned to the crater. The Drakari had not moved. Its breathing seemed even more shallow than before. Robert positioned the cargo sled next to the creature and began the difficult work of rolling it onto the platform. The warrior was heavy, far heavier than it looked, but Robert had spent years moving livestock and machinery. He understood leverage and patience. The Drakari's eyes opened briefly during the move. It looked at Robert with an expression that might have been confusion. Why was this small human helping instead of running away or attacking? Robert met its gaze and nodded once, as if answering the unspoken question. The journey back to the barn took 20 minutes of careful pulling. Robert's shoulders burned with effort by the time he maneuvered the sled through the barn doors. He had cleared space earlier, pushing aside equipment and laying out clean tarps. Now he transferred the injured warrior onto the makeshift bed and began assessing the damage. 3 of the creature's ribs were clearly broken. The wings would need careful treatment to heal properly. Burns covered at least 30% of its body. Robert had treated injured animals for years, but this was different. This was a person, just shaped differently than humans. He started with the basics. Clean the wounds, stop the bleeding, make the patient comfortable. Robert worked through the night, using his veterinary knowledge and common sense. The Drakari drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes watching Robert work with those golden eyes. As dawn broke and the storm finally cleared, Robert sat on a wooden stool next to his patient. The creature's breathing had stabilized. The bleeding had stopped. It would live, probably, if infection did not set in. The Drakari's eyes opened fully and focused on Robert. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the warrior made a sound, softer than before, that might have been a question. Robert smiled tiredly and offered water in a large metal bowl. The creature hesitated, pride warring with desperate thirst, then drank deeply. They had a long road ahead. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the barn walls when the Drakari warrior woke properly for the first time. Robert had dozed off in his chair, his body finally demanding rest after working through the night. A soft huffing sound brought him instantly alert. The creature was trying to sit up, its muscles trembling with the effort. Fresh blood seeped from one of the bandaged wounds. Robert stood quickly and moved closer, hands raised in what he hoped was a calming gesture. "Stop moving," he said firmly. "You'll tear everything open again." The Drakari did not understand the words, but it recognized the tone. Its golden eyes fixed on Robert with an intensity that would have frightened most people. Robert had faced down angry bulls and protective mother cows. He held his ground and pointed at the creature, then at the ground, making a settling motion with his hands. After a tense moment, the warrior slowly lowered itself back down. It watched Robert with obvious suspicion, but it was learning. This human had helped instead of harming. That fact alone confused everything the Drakari thought it knew about weaker species. Robert left the barn and returned 10 minutes later with raw meat from his freezer. He had thawed several pounds overnight, guessing that a creature with teeth like that would be a meat eater. He placed the bowl within reach and stepped back. The Drakari sniffed the food, then looked at Robert with what might have been surprise. It ate slowly, carefully, never taking its eyes off the human. When the bowl was empty, the creature made a rumbling sound that was not quite a growl. Robert chose to interpret it as thanks. Over the next few days, they developed a routine. Robert brought food and water 3 times daily. He changed bandages and applied medicine to the burns. The Drakari allowed this treatment with growing tolerance, though its pride clearly suffered from needing help. On the 4th day, Robert dragged an old translation device from his storage shed. The technology was basic, designed for simple communication with the various alien traders who occasionally visited the colony. He powered it up and placed it between himself and his patient. "Can you understand this?" Robert spoke slowly into the device. The machine hummed and produced a series of clicks and low-frequency sounds. The Drakari's eyes widened. It responded with its own sounds, which the device translated into halting English. "You help. Why?" The translation was rough, but understandable. Robert considered the question. "You were hurt. I couldn't just leave you there." More clicks and sounds as the machine worked. "I am Ashkor, warrior of the Drakari. We are enemies? Are we?" Robert shook his head. "I'm Robert. I'm a farmer. I don't have enemies, just neighbors I haven't met yet." Ashkor made a sound that the translator could not interpret. "Your species is soft, weak, this is known." Robert laughed, surprising both of them. "Soft, maybe, weak?" He held up his calloused hands. "I work this land every day. I've survived droughts, storms, and equipment failures that would have killed a softer man. Different kinds of strength exist in this universe, Ashkor." The Drakari warrior studied Robert with new interest. Over the following days, they talked more. The translator improved as it learned their speech patterns. Ashkor explained that he had been part of a scouting mission near the frontier. His ship had been ambushed by the Krell Dominion, a hostile empire that showed no mercy to prisoners. The battle had been brutal. Ashkor's squad had been wiped out and he had barely escaped in a damaged pod before it failed completely. "They left me for dead," Ashkor said one evening, his translated voice carrying a bitter edge. "Both the Krell and my own people. In battle, the wounded slow everyone down. It is the way." Robert frowned as he checked Ashkor's wing, which was healing better than expected. "That's a terrible way. What's the point of being strong if you abandon your own?" "Survival of the strongest ensures the species continues," Ashkor replied, but he sounded less certain than before. "Survival of the smartest makes more sense to me," Robert said. "My species learned that lesson the hard way. We nearly destroyed ourselves fighting over who was strongest. We only survived by learning to work together to help each other. Ashkor shifted uncomfortably. You lost your mate. I saw the picture in your dwelling. Yet you live alone, far from your people. Why? Robert was quiet for a moment. My wife got sick. Cancer, we call it. I couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but watch her suffer. After she died, the city felt wrong. Too many memories, too much noise. I came here to work with my hands and find some peace. Maybe to remember what matters. What matters? Ashkor asked. Life, Robert said simply. Growing things, caring for things, protecting things. That matters more than glory or strength. Ashkor considered this as Robert finished the bandage work. The Drakari warrior attempted to stand and this time succeeded. His legs shook but held. Robert stayed close, ready to catch him if he fell, and Ashkor noticed this protective instinct. Your culture values different things than mine, Ashkor said slowly, but I begin to see this is not weakness. This is, the translator struggled. Another form of power, Robert smiled. Now you're learning. Come on, let's get you moving. Muscles waste away if you don't use them. My grandmother taught me that too. They walked slowly around the inside of the barn, Ashkor leaning on Robert when necessary. The proud warrior's acceptance of help showed how much had changed in just a few days. Trust had begun to grow between a human farmer and an alien warrior, built on nothing more than kindness and honest conversation. Neither of them knew that their quiet peace was about to end. 2 weeks passed like water flowing downhill, smooth and natural. Ashkor's wounds healed faster than Robert had expected, though the Drakari warrior still could not fly. His wings needed more time, but he walked without pain now and helped around the farm whenever Robert would allow it. They worked together in comfortable silence most days, communicating through gestures and the occasional translated word. Ashkor proved surprisingly gentle when handling the livestock, and he showed genuine interest in how Robert managed the land. The warrior's pride had softened into something closer to respect, but the peace could not last forever. Robert noticed the changes first. Military ships began appearing more frequently in the upper atmosphere, their contrails crisscrossing the sky at dawn and dusk. The colonial news feeds carried troubling reports. Several frontier outposts had gone silent. Strange ships had been spotted near the border regions. The authorities tried to sound calm, but Robert heard the worry underneath their words. Ashkor saw the ships too. He stood in the wheat field one evening, his golden eyes tracking a formation as it passed overhead. His whole body had gone tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. You recognize them, Robert said. It was not a question. Ashkor nodded slowly. Military patterns, both human and Drakari vessels. They are hunting something. Or someone, Robert added quietly. The warrior turned to face him. You should report me. Turn me over to your authorities. This would be safer for you. Robert shook his head. That's not how I do things, Ashkor. You're not a criminal. You're someone who needed help and you still need time to fully heal. Besides, he added with a slight smile, you've been useful around here. Best farmhand I've had in years. Ashkor made the huffing sound that Robert had learned meant amusement, but the worry did not leave his eyes. That night, Robert found Ashkor standing outside the barn, staring at the stars. The translator device sat on a fence post between them. Tell me about the Krell, Robert said. The ones who attacked you. Ashkor was silent for a long moment. The Krell Dominion is an empire built on conquest. They are hunters who prize the kill above all else. When they attack, they leave nothing alive. No survivors, no mercy, no exceptions. I have seen entire colonies reduced to ash by their forces. Why would they come here? Green Hollow is just a farming world. We have nothing worth taking. You have location, Ashkor replied. This system sits between multiple trade routes. Control it, and the Krell control access to a dozen other worlds. They do not value land for growing food. They value strategic position. Robert absorbed this information, and you were scouting this area when they ambushed you. What else haven't you told me? Ashkor's respect for Robert had grown enough that he answered honestly. My implant carries data. Positions of Krell staging grounds, movement patterns, fleet compositions, military intelligence that could save many lives. But the implant was damaged in the crash. I cannot access it or transmit it to my people. Can it be repaired? Perhaps. But doing so would activate its beacon. Anyone monitoring for Drakari signals would know exactly where I am. Robert understood immediately, including the Krell. including the Krell. They stood in silence, both understanding the weight of that knowledge. Finally, Robert spoke. "What would you do? If you were me?" Ashkor considered carefully before answering. "I would send me away. The risk is too great. One warrior, even one with valuable intelligence, is not worth the safety of your home and your life." "That's what your people would do," Robert said. "I asked what you would do." The Drakari warrior turned to fully face Robert. "I have learned much from you these past weeks. You have shown me that strength comes in many forms. Compassion is not weakness. Protecting what matters is not cowardice. If I were you," he paused, "I would make the choice that lets me sleep at night. Honor matters more than survival." Robert smiled. "Then we repair that implant. We get that information to people who can use it. And we deal with whatever comes after. The Krell will come," Ashkor warned. "Then we'll be ready for them." Over the next 3 days, they worked to repair the implant. Robert's knowledge of agricultural technology proved surprisingly useful. The basic principles of circuitry and power systems applied across species. Ashkor guided him through the delicate process, and slowly, the damaged implant began responding. On the third evening, the device activated with a soft pulse of light beneath Ashkor's scales. Data began streaming, uploading everything the warrior had recorded during his mission. The transmission was automatic, broadcasting to any Drakari military vessel within range. It also broadcasted their location to anyone else who was listening. Ashkor and Robert stood together in the wheat field, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and red. The beauty of the moment felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. "They will be here soon," Ashkor said quietly. "The Krell track their targets with perfect efficiency. They know I survived. They will come to finish the job, and they will kill anyone who sheltered me." Robert checked his rifle, an old but reliable weapon that had belonged to his father. "This is my land, Ashkor, my home. I've buried enough people I loved. I'm not running, and I'm not letting them take you either." The Drakari warrior looked at his friend with something approaching wonder. "You would fight for me? Risk your life against trained killers?" "You're not just anyone anymore," Robert said simply. "You're family. That's what humans do for family. We stand together." Ashkor placed one massive clawed hand on Robert's shoulder, careful not to hurt him. "Then we stand together. If the Krell want war, we will give them something better. We will show them what happens when a warrior and a farmer refuse to yield." The stars came out above them, cold and distant. Somewhere among those stars, hunters were coming. Dawn came slowly to Green Hollow, painting the wheat fields gold. Robert had not slept. He sat on his porch, rifle across his lap, watching the eastern sky lighten degree by degree. Ashkor stood nearby, his wings partially extended, testing their strength. The warrior could fly now, though not for long distances. His body had healed, but true recovery took time. They did not have time. The ships appeared just after sunrise, 3 angular craft that moved with predatory grace. They were smaller than military vessels, built for speed and violence rather than cargo or comfort. Black metal reflected no light, making them look like holes cut into the sky. They descended in formation, circling Robert's farm once before landing in a triangle pattern around the property. Robert stood slowly, keeping his rifle pointed at the ground but ready. Ashkor moved to stand beside him, and together they waited on the porch of the small farmhouse. The Krell emerged from their ships like nightmares given form. They stood on 6 legs, their bodies covered in dark chitin that looked harder than steel. 4 arms ending in blade-like claws extended from their torsos. Their heads were insectoid with multiple eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. Each one carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. 6 warriors in total, against 1 healing Drakari and 1 human farmer. The largest Krell stepped forward, and when it spoke, its voice came from a translator device that made the words sound harsh and mechanical. "Drakari Scout designated Ashkor. You are marked for termination. Surrender yourself, and the human who harbored you will die quickly. Resist, and both will suffer before the end." Robert had faced down many things in his life. Storms that destroyed crops, disease that killed livestock, the slow, terrible death of his wife. Each had taught him that fear was natural, but it did not have to control his actions. "This is private property," Robert said clearly, his voice carrying across the yard. "You're trespassing. I'm asking you once to leave peacefully." The Krell made a sound that might have been laughter. "The human speaks as if it has power here. Amusing. You will be added to our count, farmer. Your death will be noted in our records. Ashkor stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Robert. The human is under my protection. You will not touch him. Your protection means nothing, the Krell leader replied. You are wounded, alone, far from your people. You failed your mission, failed your squad, and now you fail even to die with honor. This human's misguided mercy has only delayed the inevitable. Robert felt anger burning in his chest. These creatures spoke about life and death like it was a game. They talked about honor while threatening to murder someone for showing kindness. He had spent weeks caring for Ashkor, watching the warrior grow stronger, learning that differences between species mattered less than character. These Krell understood nothing about that. You're wrong about one thing, Robert said. He's not alone. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot took the Krell leader in one of its eyes. The creature staggered back, wounded but not dead. Its companions reacted instantly, raising their weapons. But Robert and Ashkor were already moving. They had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. Robert knew every inch of his farm, every place that offered cover, every advantage the terrain could provide. Ashkor had trained him in basic combat tactics, teaching him how to move and shoot against multiple opponents. Theory became practice in the span of heartbeats. Robert rolled behind his tractor as energy blasts scorched the ground where he had been standing. Ashkor launched himself at the nearest Krell, his claws finding weak points in its armor. They crashed together in a tangle of scales and chitin. Robert fired again from behind cover, taking another Krell in the leg. The creature stumbled and Ashkor was there, finishing it with brutal efficiency. 2 down, 4 remaining. The Krell adapted quickly. They spread out, trying to surround their targets. But Robert had prepared for this too. He triggered the first trap, and a section of fencing electrified with stored power from his farm equipment. 1 Krell touched it and convulsed, its systems overloading. 3 left. The battle became chaos. Robert used his knowledge of the farm like a weapon. He led the Krell through his equipment storage, where falling tools became deadly obstacles. He fired from windows and doorways, never staying in one place long enough to become a target. Ashkor fought with the fury of a warrior defending his home, because that was what this farm had become. His home, his family. The Krell leader, wounded but still dangerous, cornered Robert near the barn, its weapon charged with a high-pitched whine. Robert's rifle was empty, his ammunition spent. He faced the creature with nothing but a farming knife in his hand. Ashkor hit the Krell from above like a meteor, his full weight driving it into the ground. They rolled across the dirt, claws and blades flashing. The warrior was wounded again, bleeding from new cuts, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Robert grabbed a fuel canister and threw it at the last 2 Krell who were trying to reach their ships. He shot the canister mid-flight, and the explosion knocked both creatures down. They did not get up. Silence fell across the farm, broken only by heavy breathing and the crackle of small fires. Ashkor stood over the Krell leader's body, his chest heaving with effort. Robert leaned against the barn wall, his hands shaking from adrenaline. They had survived. Then Robert's emergency beacon began flashing. His desperate broadcast during the fight had been received. New ships appeared in the sky above them, and these were much larger than the Krell hunters. Both human and Drakari military vessels descended toward the farm. Robert and Ashkor looked at each other, then up at the incoming ships. The fight was over, but the real test was just beginning. They had proven they could stand together against enemies. Now they would face their own people's reactions to what they had done. Ashkor moved to stand beside Robert, both of them watching the ships land. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The human ships landed first, dropping combat teams in defensive positions around Robert's property. Soldiers in armor spread out with weapons ready, securing the area with professional efficiency. A transport carrier touched down near the house, and an officer in a colonial defense uniform stepped out. The Drakari vessels came down moments later, larger and more aggressive in design. Warriors emerged with weapons drawn, their scales gleaming in the morning light. They moved like predators, every motion controlled and purposeful. For a tense moment, 3 forces faced each other across Robert's trampled wheat field. Humans, Drakari, and in the middle, 1 exhausted farmer and 1 wounded warrior standing together on a porch. The human officer approached carefully, her eyes taking in the destroyed Krell ships and the bodies scattered across the property. She was older, maybe 50, with the kind of face that had seen too many battles. Her nameplate read Captain Patricia Wade. "Robert Hayes?" she asked, her hand resting on her sidearm. "That's me," Robert replied. He had not lowered his rifle yet. "This is my land. Those Krell attacked us without provocation." A massive Drakari warrior moved forward from the other group. He wore armor marked with symbols of rank, and his scales were a deep crimson color that seemed to glow in the sunlight. When he saw Ashkor, his eyes widened with what might have been shock. "Ashkor," the warrior said, his translated voice carrying clearly. "You live. We received your transmission. We thought the Krell had already killed you." Ashkor straightened despite his wounds. "War Chief Draven, I survived because this human gave me shelter and care. He risked his life to protect me from the hunters." Draven's gaze shifted to Robert, studying him with intensity. A human farmer sheltered a Drakari warrior? "This is unexpected." Captain Wade stepped closer, her posture tense. "We need to sort out what happened here. Mr. Hayes, you harbored an alien soldier without reporting to colonial authorities. That's a serious violation of frontier protocols." Robert felt his temper flare. "I found an injured person on my land and I helped him. Since when is that a crime?" "Since that person is a soldier from a foreign power," Wade replied, though her tone suggested she was not entirely comfortable with her own argument. "We have procedures for these situations. Your procedures would have let him die while you filled out paperwork," Robert shot back. "I don't work that way." Draven made a sound that silenced everyone. "The human speaks truth. Our cultures have lived apart for too long, seeing each other as lesser beings. But this farmer has shown more honor than many warriors I have known." He turned to Ashkor. "Tell me everything." Ashkor spoke, his words flowing through the translator with growing confidence. He described the ambush, the crash, Robert's immediate care without hesitation or fear. He explained how the farmer had treated his wounds using knowledge and improvisation. He talked about their conversations, the growing understanding between them, the choice to repair the implant knowing it would bring danger. "Robert could have turned me over to his authorities at any time," Ashkor continued. "He could have fled when the Krell arrived. Instead, he stood with me. He fought beside me as a battle brother. This human defended my life with his own, asking nothing in return." Captain Wade listened with visible surprise. "You fought the Krell together? A civilian and a wounded alien soldier, and you survived?" "We did more than survive," and Robert said quietly. "We won." Draven walked slowly around the battlefield, examining the Krell bodies and destroyed ships. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture suggested deep thought. He stopped in front of the porch where Robert and Ashkor stood. "In my culture," Draven said carefully, "when one warrior saves another's life in battle, a debt is formed that transcends all other obligations. Ashkor, by our oldest laws, you owe this human a life debt." Ashkor nodded without hesitation. "I know. I declare it freely before witnesses. Robert Hayes has my loyalty until death." Wade rubbed her face tiredly. "This is going to create a diplomatic nightmare. But," she added, looking at Robert with something like respect, "you also documented the Krell attack on a civilian target. That's a clear violation of several treaties. The evidence here backs up your claim of self-defense. Plus," she continued, "you managed to hold off 6 Krell hunters with minimal resources. That's going to be studied in tactical classes for years. You're either incredibly lucky or incredibly skilled. Incredibly stubborn," Robert corrected. "I'm just a farmer who didn't want to lose a friend." The word hung in the air. Friend, not ally. Not asset. Friend. Draven made a decision. "Captain Wade, the Drakari Empire formally requests that Robert Hayes be recognized as a friend to our people. The intelligence Ashkor carried has already been transmitted to our fleet. We now know where the Krell are staging their invasion forces. Because of this human's actions, thousands of lives may be saved." Wade considered this. "I'll need to clear it with my superiors, but given the circumstances, I think we can work something out." She looked at Robert. "You realize your quiet farming days are probably over?" Robert glanced at Ashkor, then at the gathered soldiers from 2 species who had rarely cooperated before today. "Maybe, but if what happened here can help prevent more killing, then it was worth it." Draven stepped forward and placed his hand on his chest, a gesture of respect among his people. "Robert Hayes, the Drakari will remember what you did. You have shown us that courage and honor exist in many forms. You have my personal gratitude." Wade extended her hand in the human custom. "On behalf of the Colonial Defense Force, thank you. What you did was reckless and against protocol, but it was also incredibly brave. Robert shook her hand, then looked at all the gathered soldiers. I didn't do anything special. I just treated someone with basic decency. Maybe if more people did that, we wouldn't need so many soldiers. Ashkor moved to stand beside Robert, and the gesture spoke louder than words. They had started as strangers from different worlds. Now they stood as family, proven through fire and choice. The universe had changed a little that day on a farm on Green Hollow. 3 months had passed since the battle that changed everything. Robert stood at the edge of his rebuilt wheat field, watching the sun set over land that looked both familiar and transformed. The crater where Ashkor had crashed was gone, filled in and replanted. New structures had been added to the property, but they fit naturally into the landscape as if they had always belonged. Ashkor approached from the barn, moving with the fluid grace of a fully healed warrior. His wings were strong again, capable of flight, though he rarely used them these days. He seemed to prefer walking the land with Robert, working side by side as they had done during those first weeks. The fence along the eastern boundary is complete, Ashkor reported. The human engineers and our technicians worked well together once they stopped arguing about methods. Robert smiled. That's progress. Last month they barely spoke to each other. The farm had become something neither of them had expected. After the incident with the Krell, both human and Drakari leadership had recognized an opportunity. Formal alliances were built on treaties and negotiations, but real understanding came from working together toward common goals. Robert's farm, already a symbol of unexpected friendship, had been chosen as a cultural exchange site. War Chief Draven had proposed the idea to Robert personally. Your farm could become neutral ground, he had explained. A place where our peoples learn to work together without politics or posturing. Just practical cooperation. Captain Wade had supported the plan. We need places where humans and Drakari can interact as individuals, not just as soldiers or diplomats. What you and Ashkor built here could be a model. Robert had agreed on one condition. It stays a working farm first. I'm not turning my home into a military base or a museum. People can come here to learn and work, but they leave their ranks and attitudes at the gate. They had honored that condition. Young soldiers from both species rotated through the farm, learning agriculture and learning each other. They worked the fields, tended livestock, and discovered that collaboration produced better results than competition. Drakari warriors learned human farming techniques. Human soldiers learned Drakari combat philosophy. Both sides learned that their assumptions about each other were often wrong. Not everyone had been supportive. Some Drakari still viewed humans as weak and beneath their notice. Some humans feared and distrusted the dragon warriors. But slowly, farm by farm, person by person, minds began to change. 5 more recruits arrive tomorrow, Ashkor said, watching the sunset with Robert. 3 humans, 2 of my people. One of the Drakari is barely out of training. He has never met a human before. Then he'll learn, Robert replied. Same as you did. Same as all of them do when they spend time here. A transport ship descended in the designated landing area, kicking up dust that turned golden in the dying light. A familiar crimson-scaled figure emerged, and Draven walked across the field to join them. War Chief, Ashkor greeted formally. We were not expecting you today. I come with news, Draven said. The Krell Dominion has withdrawn from 3 border systems. Our combined human Drakari task force pushed them back without a single ship lost. The cooperation we learned here, he gestured at the farm, has proven effective in battle. Robert felt a mix of emotions at that news. He was glad lives had been saved, but he wished the cooperation had not required violence to prove its worth. Draven seemed to sense his thoughts. Peace is built slowly, Robert Hayes. What you started here spreads farther each day. 12 other worlds have requested to establish similar programs. Young warriors return to their units speaking of the human farmer who taught them that strength and wisdom are not the same thing. I just showed them how to plant crops and fix equipment, Robert said modestly. You showed them how to see beyond their conditioning, Draven corrected. That is a far more valuable lesson. Captain Wade's transport landed minutes later, and she joined the group with several data pads in hand. Robert, we need to talk about expansion. The program has been so successful that Colonial Command wants to officially fund it. Better facilities, more resources, permanent staff. Robert shook his head. No. The moment this becomes an official program with bureaucracy and funding committees, it loses what makes it work. This is my farm. It stays small, personal, and real. Wade smiled as if she had expected that response. I told them you would say that. So we compromised. Your farm stays exactly as it is, but we help fund 20 other farms across the frontier. Each one run by a civilian who volunteers. Each one a place where people from different worlds can work together without the weight of politics. That could work, Robert admitted, as long as each place keeps its independence. Ashkor placed his hand on Robert's shoulder. You have created something remarkable, my friend. Not through force or grand speeches, but through simple actions repeated daily. This is the human way, I think. Small kindnesses that build into great changes. As darkness fell, more people arrived for the evening meal. Human soldiers laughed with Drakari warriors over shared stories. A young recruit from Earth argued good-naturedly with a Drakari about the best way to harvest wheat. An older warrior taught a human corporal a traditional song from his homeworld. Robert watched them all from his porch, the same place where he had stood with a rifle facing Krell hunters. So much had changed, yet the essential truth remained the same. People, regardless of their species or origin, needed the same basic things: respect, purpose, and connection. Ashkor joined him on the porch, and they sat together in comfortable silence as the stars emerged overhead. Those same stars that had once held only separation, now held possibility. Ships traveled between worlds carrying not just cargo but understanding. Do you ever regret it? Ashkor asked quietly. You had peace here before I crashed into your field. Now you have responsibility, visitors, and a role you never asked for. Robert considered the question carefully. He thought about his wife, about the lessons she had taught him regarding living a life that mattered. He thought about the young people learning to see past their differences in his fields. He thought about the friendship he had built with an alien warrior who had become the brother he never had. No regrets, Robert said finally. I'm exactly where I need to be. They sat together as the night deepened, a farmer and a warrior watching their improbable dream grow stronger with each passing day. The universe was vast and often cruel, but in one small corner of it, on a farm on Green Hollow, hope had taken root and was spreading like wildfire. Sometimes the greatest changes began with the simplest choice. One person deciding to help instead of turning away. One act of kindness that rippled outward until it touched the stars themselves. Robert Hayes had wanted only peace and quiet when he came to this frontier world. Instead, he had found purpose, family, and a legacy that would outlive him. The farm would continue long after he was gone, a living reminder that compassion was not weakness, and that the strongest foundations were built not on force but on fellowship. The future remained uncertain, but it felt full of possibility. And that was enough.